All right. Welcome, everybody, to the fourth edition of An Artful Life, curious conversations about the ways humans make and use art. And I am very excited. Melissa and I are very excited today to have Barry Moser. And having said that, Melissa, why don't you take it away and give us an introduction of Barry and yourself, please?
I would love to. I'm a little bit giddy today, so I may trip over my tongue because Barry is not just a friend, he's a big hero of mine. I have loved your work, Barry, for forever, and not just me. His work is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Practically every wonderful museum in our country, the Library of Congress. There are universities who have study sections about his work. Books that you love have been made by Barry. You probably know hundreds of his images without maybe necessarily knowing his name is attached to it if you're not a big fan of fine books. But it's a big deal to be here together today. And Barry, I am so thrilled.
Well, thank you.
And should add maybe that Barry is a artist and illustrator and also a writer and many other things as well. But I think first and foremost, artist and illustrator.
I did warn you, I'm a little dazzled.
Yeah. So for those of you who are new, Melissa is my co-host, and we invite every month a notable person from the art world to share their wisdom and their magic with us here on LinkedIn. And this is also being streamed in other places, but LinkedIn is our main home for the show. Why don't we just jump in? We have lots of questions for you, Barry. We also have some of your images, so we can relate to what we're talking about. And Melissa, you will prompt me when you're ready for those.
Yep.
But why don't you take it away with our first question, Melissa?
Yes. Recently, on the same visit, when my husband and I were able to visit you, Barry, we stopped in at the Brandywine Museum, and there our very erudite guide had what I thought was an excellent, simple definition of the difference between fine art and illustration, which was an illustration is an image intended to accompany text. And I thought that was simple and clear and a useful thing, except that I don't agree with it. A good image, a beautiful illustration is fine art to me, and I don't see any difference. And I wondered where you stand on that. Is there a difference between illustration and fine art?
No. It depends on context entirely. If you look at the work of Albrecht Dürer, for instance. Now, are his works independent of everything, or are they telling stories? Well, his work tells stories. So if they're telling a story, you're introducing into the graphic image, you're introducing narrative. And for me, that if there is a difference, that's where the difference lies. It's that the work that I call illustration, and I'm not embarrassed by the word nor hesitant to use it as an identifier of me. I'm telling stories, and that makes it very different. Now, if I'm not telling a story, I'm very likely not to use much subject matter. So that enters into the formula too, as to what the intention is. If I'm intending to tell a story without using subject matter, it's going to appeal to very few people, and certainly will not get any message across, no story across. So that's my distinction. I think it's a petty idea, and to begin with, that there's really a distinction.
I agree. In my mind, there's no distinction. It's either a successful image or it isn't.
Amen.
Okay.
Exactly. And if you happen to have 10 or 12 successful images in one book, you're damn lucky.
Nice.
You might, out of the 12, you might get 2.
speaking of images in books, when someone approaches you to do a book, how do you decide if you wish to agree? And then how do you choose imagery out of text?
Whoa, you full of it this morning. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, all of my books do not come from being offered to me.
Uh-huh.
A lot of my books are because I want to do them. I mean, the King James Bible that I did published in 1999, that wasn't funded. I mean, it was funded by somebody, but it wasn't from a publisher. It was my idea from the very beginning. But when someone does come to me, the first criterion for me is that it has to be moral. In other words, if someone came to me and offered me an awful lot of money to do an illustrated edition of Mein Kampf, the answer would be
No.
no. And I've got 3 words for that. And,
We all know what those are, yes.
we do. So, I mean, that's a criterion. If David Duke came to me to want to do a book of his, I'd say no, for moral reasons. Now, having to do with anything else like pornography, it depends on where the line would be drawn. I have certainly done some images that, even in the Bible, I had a woman write me and tell me that the image I did of the Ecce Homo, Jesus with a crown of thorns, was pornographic because he had the breasts of a woman. It's crazy. I mean, so I don't worry about any of that sort of thing when I decide to do a book. If I decide to do a book, it's because I think I can add something to it. Mark Twain said that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Mark Twain said that the education is a matter of taking a kid from where he is to where he ain't. And I think that my work in books as an illustrator, if I'm doing my job well, is I'll take the book from where it is to where it ain't. Now, there was another part of your question that I've now forgotten.
I will remind you, but I wanted to add right in there that Tom Waits once said a lovely thing when someone asked him why he had written a song to accompany a film as a score of a film, and the song didn't seem to be saying the same thing that the scene did. And he said, well, if the song and the scene say the same thing, one of us is unnecessary.
Yeah, yes.
The second part of my question is, once you've accepted a text or chosen a text of your own volition, how then do the images get born out to accompany the text?
Slowly, usually, or all in a rush. It depends. I mean, every book has its own personality, both in terms of the content of the book and how I'm dealing with it. If I'm going to deal with a 5x7 book, I'm going to be seeing the text in a very different way than I would be seeing it if I were going to do an 8.5, 11 book.
Okay.
Because that gives me just a little bit of, I don't have a lot of room. I mean, when I did the Bible, one of the last images in the Bible is a last judgment. Christ on his throne. Yeah, he liked that. But when I did that, I've got 9 by 12 inches of surface to get that image in. Michelangelo had a wall. I mean, so there's a restriction in terms of space, how much I can get into that tiny little bit of space. So that becomes a problem. And it also, though, leads into how I'm going to determine what I'm going to do. Because if the text tells me that it is set in Venice, and it's about a young woman, traveling, I have the option between to do the young woman or to do
Venice.
Venice. Guess who I'm going to do on a 5x7 format?
A young woman.
Exactly. Now, if I had a canvas that was 3 feet by 2, I might throw my hand at it.
Mm-hmm.
But so there's the practical limitation. That's one of the things people don't understand about art. They think it's something that just poof comes out of nowhere.
Mhm.
When it's so far from the truth. I mean, it comes out of, well, as E.H. Gombrich said, art comes from art. Art begets art.
Mhm.
Yeah, so.
What are your preferred media? I know that you are a beautiful watercolorist. You do engravings. I think you've done intaglio printing. Have you,
Yeah.
drawing, ink washes. What do you prefer?
Well, I like the ones that are difficult. So engraving, it would be at the top of the list. I think that's because I like things. If I'm pushing, for instance, I would be a terrible potter.
Oh,
I mean, I don't think I could throw the first pot because it's so pliable. It moves so easily. I've tried. I mean, I've had my hand in the clay. I tried to raise a pot, but I don't know. It's not the way I like to work. I want to push against something.
that's why you weren't excited when I was talking to you about the Dick Blick Ready cut that's rubbery.
That's right. It's exactly right. Yeah. It just, yeah. So I need something that pushes. And that's a really hard wood or this material that I engraved for so many years, called resin engrave. So that would be the top of the list. And I mean, drawing, I told you when you and Dowd were here the other day that I've been building my images in the computer ever since I discovered Photoshop. And because Photoshop simply propelled me ahead at 4 times the speed of doing exactly what I've been doing all my life, which is collecting bits and pieces of images, putting them together as a collage. Well, Photoshop allows me to do it as montage.
Mhm.
And it's just so much faster to get me to where I think of myself as constructing images.
Hmm.
So I put together the image, and when I'm finished with it, it really rather looks like a photograph,
Okay.
except certain parts don't quite match up, but then I transfer that off on a block, and then I engrave it from there. But in terms of watercolor, I do the same thing, but then I just trace it off onto a nice piece of handmade watercolor paper. And I don't shy away from the word trace either, because I've been tracing ever since I was a child. And I have my students when I teach drawing to trace and time your tracing. And you trace a Rembrandt drawing and estimate how long it took Rembrandt to do that drawing and trace in that time scheme. I had an exchange with Jasper Johns one time, and he said something about he used one of my images in one of his paintings. And he said in his letter, he said, I just merely traced your image off one of my paintings. Tracing is not a bad thing to do. So anyway, but a lot of people think it is. Sometimes I don't know that it's cheating.
No, I love it too when I'm designing a block print and I have a part of it that I like and a part of it that needs redesign. Tracing is amazing.
Yeah. So was there another part of that question?
Well, that was it. But we can seg from technique to the time you spent with Leonard Baskin. What would you say was his gift to you? What did you learn with Leonard? What can you tell us about that exchange?
Persistence.
Hmm.
In a word, when I met Lenny, God, 1967, I guess it was, I don't think he liked me very much. No, in fact, I know he didn't like me very much because there is a letter that was for a while in my possession until I gave it to Smith College, in which he says as much. But I think I know why. And Melissa, you will understand this, I think, better than most. I have a Southern accent.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm not aware of it, but apparently I do. And I think, Lenny, like a lot of people up here north, when they hear a Southern accent, they think you're stupid.
It can happen.
Oh, it happens. It happens a lot. And sometimes I make it worse by going in and start talking like this, you know, down there in Rossville, Georgia. But so I think he just was put off by me, and he was very curt. I studied. The word "studied" here has to be in quotation marks and in italics and in boldface. Because I did 10 drawings for Leonard. When I met him the first time I met him, my hands were sweating. He asked me to take a top off of a jar of liquid ground, etching ground, and I couldn't do it. And he said, "Why not?" And he said, "You're a big, strong boy. You should be." I said, "No, my hands are sweating." "Why are your hands sweating?" "Because I'm in here with you." And that was a mistake. And I think that showing that much deference to him with a Southern accent. So anyway, he said, "Well, what do you want to study?" I said, "Drawing." And he said, "Well, go draw something." "What?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "What do you want? Go draw something that you're really close to." And I said, "Well, no, I don't want to do that." He would go draw a tree. And I went and I drew a tree, and took it back to him, and he looked at it and he said, "Why'd you put a small drawing on such a big piece of paper?" And I said, "I don't know. That's the sort of thing I tell my students." So when I did it again, he saw it. He said, "Go do it again." I brought in the next drawing. He looked at it for maybe, I'll give it 10 seconds. That's generous. And then he would say, "Go do it again."
Wow.
No criticism, no comments, just go do it again. And he did that 8 or 9 times. Until finally one day I had a drawing and I took it in to see for a guy that was like my patron at the time. And Leonard happened to be there. And he saw the drawing and he looked at it longer this time. And then he turned to me and he said, that's a nice drawing. I'd buy that drawing."
Ooh.
And then, and here's the zinger. "So tell me, who did that drawing? You or me?" Interesting question.
Yes.
Because yes, I did the drawing. The ink flowed from the pen that was in my hand. But I wouldn't have done it without him. And I wouldn't have done it 10 times over. Mm-hmm. And that's why my one-word response to your question is persistence. He taught me that. He taught me to persist, persist, persist. Keep on, because you can always do it better. No matter what you've done, you can always do it better.
Yeah. Which brings me to a quote that I really liked in your autobiography that I'm enjoying the heck out of, which is, "I consider the discipline of good craftsmanship to be a basic precondition to good art."
So knowing how to handle your materials and handle them well. Yeah. That is, yeah. I mean, you can't create art. Big pause right there. I put in 3 ellipses, right, one after the other, because so much art today is created by people who do not have a sense of craftsmanship. Mm-hmm. I don't want to quote anybody or cite any examples, but I run into it occasionally. But no, in my philosophy, big word, but that's the way I work. I work on the idea that I have to do what I do to the best of my abilities. I just working on a project because I can't do engravings anymore. I've taken up wood cut, which is a different medium from wood engraving. And I just did this project, and I did 14 woodcuts for it. But we packed up all of the blocks last week, and there are 28 of them. So for every block that made it into the final cut, 14 went in. And the primary reason for their going into the bin was because they didn't come up to my degree, my standards of craftsmanship.
I'm afraid I don't know the difference between a woodcut and a wood engraving.
Grain of the wood. If a tree grows in this direction, well, that's not a good example. A medicine bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Where the camera is. So the medicine bottle is the tree. The tree is growing vertically. That's where a plank of wood is cut, and that's where woodcut is done, is drawn.
I've got a tree. I'm in Rossville, Georgia, and there's a train track.
I thought it was something I was doing with my hands here. It's going in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
You cut it this way. You make a drawing on the plank.
Melissa, why don't you mute yourself?
Okay, that's what I'll do.
Chattanooga choo-choo. Okay, so that's where a woodcut is done. Now, if you turn it this way and you cut across the grain and you make an image in the end grain of the wood and you cut it there, that's a wood engraving. That's the principal difference. The other difference is that woodcuts are done with a gouge, a scoop, either a V shape or U shape. And the engravings are done with tools that are solid shafts. They don't have a gouge in them, though. They're just straight steel. And they come down to a number of points, basically a U and a V and an ellipse. And that's the difference. Other than that, they're both relief processes. You put them in a printing press, ink them up, and slam them against a piece of paper, and you got a print.
Did we want to look at some samples? Because I think this would be a nice time to kind of get visual.
Yes, please.
So after I've promised that I'm woefully not prepared. Okay, here we go. So Melissa, I don't know whether you want to tell me where to go. Which.
Let's start with that. I believe that it's And the Sea Stopped Raging with Jonah and the Whale from the Pennyroyal Caxton Bible. And Pennyroyal is Barry's own publishing press of hand-pulled books, hand-bound books. What can you tell us about this image, Barry?
Oh, Lord God, how much can I tell you about this? We're going to go back to Moby Dick on this one because I did Moby Dick way back in the late 70s.
Yeah.
And so when I came to the Bible, and I came to this particular part, the good book doesn't say anything about a whale. It says a big fish. And I was originally doing this image with a big fish coming up behind him. I think it was a trout, because trout have these really nasty teeth. And my daughter came by. She was working for me at the time, my oldest daughter. And she stopped and she said, She saw the image up on the computer where I was building it. And she said, that could be a poster for Jaws, Dad.
Oh. And
I went ballistic. I think I called her, I don't know. Anyway, I got really mad, threw her out, she told her to go home. And then I sat there and I looked at the image and I said, you're right. Mm-hmm. It did. And then I thought, the whale thing, because Melissa, you said it yourself just then, Jonah and the whale,
I did.
the way it's thought of. Well, the fact of the matter is Herman Melville in Moby Dick called whales fish.
Hmm.
Now, he knew damn well that they're mammals. He's got a whole chapter dedicated to its penis. So he knew that it was a mammal, and yet he still called the whale a fish. And that was my permission, in a sense, to use the whale image. And when I put those flukes behind that head, bingo,
Yeah.
worked.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons it worked is because it's so bloody simple.
Yes.
Mhm.
And simplicity reigns over everything, as far as I'm concerned.
And the drama of the black and white. I also love that the lines of the background are not dead vertical. They sort of gently cup the tail.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it.
I wish I'd moved this. See, here you go. Now, right now, if I were constructing this image and it were on my, I'd move his head about halfway, cut that distance of the black on his right side. I cut that in half, move him a little bit.
We'll keep an eye out for version 2. Let's look at the next one, Nina.
Do you want to go? Want to stay with the fish or mammal in water?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, then I'll do this one.
There's the big whale. Yeah. Now this is from Moby Dick. It's the only full-page illustration in the entire book. It was not a happy project. The publisher of the book sweet-talked me to begin with and made everything like it was going to be copacetic. But then when we got started, things turned not so copacetic. It's the only physical fight I have ever been in my life, and in my adult life, let me put it that way. And from that point, which was pretty early on in the project, it was in April 15, actually, tax day. Everything having to do with the project went through lawyers.
Oh.
There was no communication between Andrew Hoyam and myself after that. Now, that said, here's another instance in which I did, I don't know, maybe a dozen sketches for this whale, and I sent them out to San Francisco for him to adjudicate. And I would have gone with any of those 12 just to get it done. It pushed me to do it again, and ended up with this particular image, which was based on a bit of sculpture that I did. I got some clay and just made myself a big whale that I could twist and turn and photograph.
And Leonard Baskin would not say to you, you put a tiny fish on a big piece of paper in this
You
case.
would not. No, you would not.
And is this wood engraving or wood cutting?
This is a wood cut.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry, wrong. This is wood engraving,
Okay.
and it's cut in grain boxwood.
All right.
Yeah. And another thing I would note here too is that Moby Dick was illustrated from a dramaturgical point of view, meaning that I was hired on to make images of tools and clothing, and just the stage sets, as it were. What the hell is going off now? I'm sorry about that.
David,
About it.
Hold on. I turned the damn phone off.
there we go.
I'm sorry about that.
It's not a problem. You were drawing tools and clothing.
I forget where I was now.
Dramaturgical.
Surgical points of illustration. Yeah, I was supplying, what a costumer would for a movie, or what a set director would be doing, and that sort of thing. There were no images of Ahab or Queequeg or any of the dramatic sort of, instances.
Mhm.
And the only place that he allowed a full page illustration was here. And it's not a white whale.
Hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that needs to be noted, and it's not a white whale. So
Hmm.
it's not Moby Dick, it is simply a big whale.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let's
All
hop to Tom Sawyer. Or is it Huckleberry Finn?
This
Yeah.
one here.
Oh, yeah,
Tom Sawyer.
that's one of my better ones. Huck and Jim. It's called Never Saying a Word.
Hmm.
And a part of what I was trying to get here was a sense of silence and quietness.
Mhm.
The image, though, arises out of my going on set with a film company to do a movie on Huck Finn for the centenary. I was called in on it because I was doing Huckleberry Finn as a centenary. No, as a 150th sesquicent. What that one is? Anyway, 150th anniversary. And I was also on the board of the local public television station at the time, and they got wind of it and asked me if I would be interested maybe in doing a poster for the movie and sort of coordinating the two projects. And I said, sure. I mean, I'm a big movie fan. And so I went down to New York City and I met with the producer, and we had a nice lunch and we really hit it off. And he said, it's for PBS. We'll do something about posters. He said, why don't you come on set with me and photograph the actors in their costumes and such. And I thought, what a great deal. And it was. That's Sam Art Williams behind the Huck.
Mm-hmm.
Sam Art just died a few weeks ago.
Oh.
And he's a noted playwright and actor. Anyway, yeah, I got to meet all kinds of interesting people. I even got to meet Lillian Gish.
Wow.
So, anyway, but this is just one image from that. And you said something about Tom Sawyer, did you?
Sorry. I thought this was from Tom Sawyer.
Oh, no, I was just waiting to light into Tom Sawyer. So
I love how the boy has a fairly optimistic and curious facial expression, and the man behind him seems to be a little bit more laden with worry.
it's interesting you would say that because there's a woman, last name is Fishkin, who I actually worked with on a couple of other books. She's a Mark Twain scholar. She's out of, I'm not sure she's out of Berkeley or not, but the Mark Twain papers are at in Berkeley at the library there.
Mhm.
And now where was I going to go with that?
The man in behind
between the
was
two men.
more worried. Yeah. That the man in the back has more of a worrisome face than the young man in the front.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry. I'm an old man.
All good.
So yeah. So I lost it again. Jesus Christ.
Well, let's move on to the wolf then.
No, it's an important point.
Okay.
So Shelley Fishkin came to me and asked me if she could reproduce this image and another image of Jim in a book that she's doing with Yale University Press about Jim. And it's taking Jim from a different point of view, not the kind of step and fetch it that Jim has so often been portrayed. She asked me to use these images because she and I see Jim from a very different point of view. We see him not quite as hero of the story, but as probably the most misunderstood literary character in American fiction. And by the way, Jim is often referred to with the N word preceding his name, N/Jim. It does not occur in Huckleberry Finn. It doesn't. It does not occur. He is never called that in the book. The only place that that happens is when someone is describing him and saying that Jim, comma, Aunt Sally's in. That's the only place that the two things, the two words come together. Anyway, so Jim is kind of a hero of mine, because when you think about it, and this is why I don't like Tom Sawyer very much, because at the very end, they're tormenting Jim by going through all this kind of stuff. Tom knew he was a free man, but didn't let him know so that they could continue to play with him. So then they all get discovered and they're running away, dogs chasing them, everything. Some guy fires off a shot and hits Tom. And so they put him in a skiff. They go out to this island, Tom, Jim, and Huck. And Tom's really hurt. So Huck goes back to land to get a doctor to come back, leaving Tom alone with Jim. Now, if I were Jim, I would have left. But no, Jim stays and ministers to this kid who is his tormentor. That, in my opinion, in my very humble opinion, that is the only moment of dignity in the entire book.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's why this image is really important to me.
Well, in this image, I go right to Jim. You really succeeded with portraying your affection and regard for his character.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
In interest of time also, Melissa, I don't think we're going to get to all the images because we have so many other phenomenal questions to ask. Is there one image in particular that we want to strike, or should we go back to questions?
In honor of my husband, who partially learned English by reading The Call of the Wild, let's look at the wolf.
All right, there we go.
I love that.
And I'm a dog fan, so I love this very much.
I don't think this is an engraving or a woodcut.
No, it's a line drawing.
Okay.
It might have a little wash in it too. I'm not sure.
I thought so.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, and I love how he's baying up into that lovely hand-done type.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I would change the T on that initial there, though. Yeah, I think it's a successful jacket, and I think it's a successful drawing. Yeah, it's nice. I'm happy with it. Yeah. I'm a big dog fan too. I mean, and when I say that, I'm using the word big in both senses of the word. I am a big dog fan, but I am a fan of big dogs. My last three were English Mastiffs.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's pretty big. They would have my dog for lunch. I have a, under the arm size that goes on the airplane with me.
Yeah, my big boy was Ike. He was 205 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
We've been looking at images of yours that are in books, and I have the privilege of having held and owning a few of your beautiful books. And these are books for people who don't think about books a lot, which are not sort of mimeographed off of computers and electronic presses. Type is set, and engraving plates or woodcut plates are put on a press. They are inked by hand. They are pulled by hand. And so every page is a handmade thing. And then a binder provides yet another art form in hand binding a book.
Exactly.
Barry, can you describe what you believe the role of these handmade books is in a culture versus the mass-produced books?
Well, the words that came to mind right there was the word I left off with there, dignity. there's a degree of dignity to a fine, well-made book, the same way there's a degree of dignity to a piece of beautiful porcelain, as opposed to, you know, a third grader's attempt at making a pot.
Yeah.
I mean, one's got a lot of dignity to it. The other one might be cute and it might be fun, and Mama really loves it. But you know, there's a big difference, and the difference is in quality and in the dignity that quality brings about.
My husband, Dow Docreev, who's an artist, a lovely artist, he has a
Good one too.
a metaphysical belief that in some way that we don't understand, the hours that an artist, artisan, poet puts into an object, a piece of paper, some linen, some weaving, the clay, that the art, that the sort of prayerful hours put into that object somehow then later emanate to the people that are around the object. And it sounds crazy, but when I have a handmade thing, I think I feel it. There's something special to me.
Like an aura.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't believe that.
I agree. I mean, I've been moved to tears by maybe a half a dozen works of art. That not including music. If I go into music, that's a different. But once was standing in front of a Rembrandt painting in the National Gallery. Just the treatment of, anyway, it moved me. Another one in the Boston Museum was this tiny bit of Japanese porcelain, a little bowl. You could see through it. It's very translucent. But in the front of it, or maybe the back, I don't know, was this one Japanese character, calligraphic character, in another white, just white on white. One tiny Japanese character on a porcelain bowl. It was so incredibly beautiful. It just, you know, did I associate with it somehow or another? Yes, of course I did. The person who did it. I was at an exhibit of some Asian calligraphy at the Academy of Art in Hawaii a few years ago. And I was standing in front of a scroll, and I started crying. That's another one, you know, and it was just strange. And then I bought a book that's the catalog of the exhibit. And when I got back home, I was reading the book, and I read, and by the way, the side of this is that I was alone at the point, but my wife that I was married to at the time was coming out to visit. And I was really lonely. Mm-hmm. And then I see this manuscript on the wall. I weep, and then I go get the book. I go home. I look at it. I read the translation of the inscription. It's a poem about a man who was missing his wife.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did something translate through without words and all of that? Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh, words.
Words.
You were talking about something you wanted to ask Barry about words.
Yes. So words. So, you know, I do photography now, but I've always been very much, I love words. Words are sort of my thing, but I'm also extremely visual. And my very first film I ever made was actually called Logos. And it was a terrible student film, but that's not the point here. The question really is it always the word that comes first? Like even the Bible, it says, you know, in the beginning was the word. For an illustrator, or are there instances and notable instances for you where it actually was the reverse, where the image came and then the word?
2 or 3 times. And the most recent one was a collaboration I did with Paul Muldoon, the poet. Paul was, for years, the poetry editor at the New Yorker. And I wanted to do, I had just separated from my wife. She left me. She just up, gone. And I'm miserable. I don't have a book project in the pipeline at the time. So I started doing these very large, almost violent, and in some ways really violent drawings. On the floor, throwing ink at it, all kinds of, action sorts of things. And then I met a guy, and he saw the drawing, he liked them. And we were trying to put together a book project. I said, well, I've got these drawings, and some of them are pretty nice. And I could translate them into engravings. And I started doing that. And then, but what text are we going to use? Okay, so the images are already in being done. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I want to call on John Asbury. But I had seen him not long ago, and he wasn't in good health, and he's now, of course, since he's gone on. But then I thought, and the reason I wanted Ashbury is because his poetry is very obscure and kind of devoid of subject matter, and I thought it'd make a nice pairing.
Oh, that's interesting.
But then that didn't work, and I thought, well, who else could I ask? Well, I'd met Muldoon when I was doing a gig down at Princeton, and he was there in an office just 3 or 4 doors down from the print shop, and we got along really well. We did a broadside together. I taught him how to set type, and we had a good time together. So I thought, well, I'll just call Paul, and I did, and he agreed. So he did 15 poems. It's called a heroic crown of sonnets. And he did these things, and I didn't see them. It wasn't part of the job. I said, would you do these? He said, I need one for each one of these. So he did. And when he sent the poems in, the sonnets, they were full of subject matter. Huh. Primarily around a barn in Ireland. And I'm thinking, holy shit, come on. But we went with it anyway.
Yep.
Where could we, our live viewers, our viewers in the future, where could we see this book and other? Where would you like me to send people to see these and perhaps purchase one?
Well, there are no more available. We only did about 25 or 30 or something like that. Very limited edition. And it's a huge book. I mean, it's what's called a double elephant. It's which is the size of the paper. It's just a very big book portfolio. Exquisitely bound too, I might add. I don't know where there would be one. It would depend on if someone really wanted to search it out. They're living near a big city or a big university where they might have a rare book collection.
Okay,
they might go there. But that book went on the market for $4,000 or $5,000, copy. Sure. So it wasn't gobbled up by a lot of individuals, or better said, it was gobbled up by a lot of individual book collectors, but probably half or more go to institutions. Okay. Who have the money to buy it.
What book or what project would you like to do, hankering to do, that you haven't yet done?
Well, I'm not old enough. I mean, God, I wish that were so. I am too old to really think about, something like the complete works of Shakespeare. But I'm also too old to continue to think about the Canterbury Tales. Unless I went at them one tale at a time, and
I like that.
got it far along as I could get. But a project like that takes money, and anybody who thinks that money and art are diametrically opposed don't know what they're talking about. No. Just like people who say that artists don't steal, they also don't know what they're talking about. So.
I'm not going to ask why you just said that.
One thing we've asked everybody on our show so far, I think we're going to make an institution of it, is what would you have to say to young artists, illustrators, or they don't have to be young, to emerging artists, illustrators, engravings, coming up and wanting to build a career?
My advice to them?
Yeah.
Mhm.
3 words. Work, work, work.
Hmm.
Every day, at certain times during the day. Flannery O'Connor was very insistent that she would sit at her desk at certain times of the day. And she said one time, she said, it's not that I think that in itself is doing anything. It's just that I think that if I'm not sitting at my desk, when those ideas come, I won't be there to receive them. And I think it's important that people establish a pattern of work, a pattern of their everyday. There's no bullshit. You get up in the morning, you go to work just like you'd have a job, at Macy's. Now, that's easy for me to say because I have a comfortable teaching job and have a degree of success with my work. Could I have said that, or would I have said that when I was 25 years old? No, because that's not the way we think then. So, I mean, while I think that is excellent advice that will probably be pertinent the closer someone gets to 40 than getting closer to 30. But meanwhile, I do think that it is important to work every day. Even if it's only an hour a day, work every day. Learn how to draw. Drawing is the mother of all of it. Even music, even dance. I mean, dance is recorded graphically. So, I mean, yeah, learn how to draw. And everybody can draw. That's another myth. People, I can't draw. Well, bullshit. It's not that you can't draw. You're not looking.
Yeah.
Every art is here, or visual art is right here. It's in the eyes. So, what else? What other advice? I've got. If somebody really wants to know the answer to that question at length, I gave a commencement. Well, I've given this commencement speech a number of places. I started it. First one was at the Mass College of Art, and then I've given it again and again, changing it, for the audience. And I gave it at the school, high school, prep school I used to teach, and it's available on YouTube.
Okay.
If you just look up Moser and then Williston, Williston. And it's not long. It's a 7-minute speech. It's gotten a standing ovation every time I've given it. And I'm pretty sure the reason that is the fact is because it's 7 minutes long.
Everyone appreciates a short speech. It's true.
Absolutely. At commencement especially. And more especially if it's hot.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are lots of things. And that little commencement speech ends up suggesting just, don't get drunk and drive a car, and don't do heavy drugs, and eat your greens.
There you go.
We are nearing the end of our time, and we have a final question, but I would like to tell people who have enjoyed this conversation. Barry didn't ask me to do this, but I so enjoy my prints that I own that are handmade by Barry. I love the books that we have, including the glorious Caxton Pennyroyal Bible. So I want to encourage you to look up his website for Pennyroyal Press. Google Pennyroyal Press.
Yeah.
And then you have a gallery in Massachusetts, the Michelson Gallery?
Gallery in Northampton, yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to put that out there. If you're wondering, what a lovely man, what a lovely conversation, where could I see more? That's my answer to you. And then, Nina, we have a traditional last question.
Yes, we do. What is your favorite art, Barry, that you have in your home or your office?
Oh my God.
5 hours later.
Well, there's nothing of mine. No work of mine is hanging in my home. So, good Lord. I mean, I've got some Goyas. I've got a beautiful Dürer print. I've got a lot of George Cress's paintings. George was my teacher in Chattanooga.
And my teacher too.
I'm going to have to come down on the Dürer.
Mhm.
Good call.
It's a tiny little engraving, metal engraving from the small Passion. Dürer was one of my earliest teachers.
Mhm.
I've studied his prints and forever. So
Thank you.
That is beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for being willing to just sort of go wherever we went with this
And skipping your lunch.
and skipping your lunch.
I'll catch up on that. I'm sorry about my phones, though.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
All that. That's
No worries. All good. This is life. This is real life. My dog didn't bark today, but very likely that he could have been a big part of this conversation too. So yeah.
Tell him I said hi.
I'm genuinely thankful for this hour together with both of you, and I'll never forget it. Thank you so much for this lovely conversation.
It's been a great hour. Yeah.
And all your listeners, be they live or be they after the fact, thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending your time with us. And we'll be back next month with a new edition of An Artful Life. Be well, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.